So I think we're ready to go. Jocelyn, you had the agenda set, which was very clear. There's a pile of information that she sent out between the two of us. And I'm hoping, we're hoping people had a chance to look at it. It was great that so many more people filled out the survey and didn't really, I think, Peter, you might have said it early on, it might not have changed much in terms of what we got, but it was, in terms of the numbers, because I think the percentages stayed pretty much the same, or at least close. But it was wonderful that so many people participated. And I also have a copy so far of the people who have signed up for next week. And they had some questions and comments that some of them added on. So we can also go over that as well. So Jocelyn, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing on the agenda was to talk about the informational forum meeting that's happening next Thursday night. Hopefully you all are planning to be there. And Kim had sent out the kind of outline of the presentation, and then we worked together on some slides for the meeting. So I don't know if you want to kind of run through the slides and see if people have feedback, or if you want to run through the outline. But obviously we want everyone to have a chance to give any feedback they have about the forum next week.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Did I hear somebody? Okay. So the outline, the PowerPoint was formulated based on the outline. And when I sent the outline out to Patrick and Jocelyn added in the names. It's like, okay, that'd be good if so-and-so did this. And so we, trying to keep this, what we're finding, okay, with the survey, when you read the comments at the end of the survey, people are really nervous. They want information. They're really nervous about what's going to happen. And I think a lot of people feel that this plan is going to be something that's mandated. But just like the POCD, it's something that is done in a certain time frame, the POCD every 10 years, this every 5, to have town input and to give people a chance to express how they feel about how they want the town to go. And it's not a mandate, it's a suggestion.
Well, so would it make sense? Should we just briefly, I can share screen, I think. We could just go through the slides and sort of highlight what we think. I think we did put some things in there to try to, help with addressing some of those fears about any kind of big change that might come from this. Should we just look at them together real quick, or?
I think we can do that. Just, if we don't need to, read through everything, but maybe just, just a quick.
Can you guys see those big enough, or do you want me to do something else? Is that all right?
It's good for me.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. All right. So I think the idea was that Patrick was going to sort of welcome everybody and just, is that right, Kim?
Yeah.
And just talk about what we were going to review with them. And then Kim, I think you were going to talk about, just briefly review with everyone who's on the steering committee, that the committee meets monthly. And one of the things I stuck in there, I created a mission statement for you all. You're welcome. Which you can change, obviously. But, again, I think nobody here at this table wants to turn Roxbury into anything other than a small rural town. So I think just sort of maybe getting that out there, I'm sure people will still be worried, but I think that my understanding anyway is that this committee is fully committed to making sure that any strategies that are suggested in this plan maintain the things that, you know, you all love about Roxbury, and don't fundamentally change, you know, its rural nature. So I just put that up front because I thought maybe, again, you know, I think it bears probably emphasizing and repeating, that, you know, supporting the creation potentially of a reasonable number of additional housing options that are needed according to the resident surveys and the data. That would be the mission. So you guys can change that, you can take it out, but it was one of the ways I was thinking, like, as Kim was mentioning, to try to start off responding to this fear that this committee is going to suggest some big, huge change that's going to change the, you know, make Roxbury into a suburb or something, you know, just to like underscore that that's not my understanding of what anyone in the committee wants to do.
I think that too, the with the comments that are in the end of the survey and throughout, and also a couple of comments that are here in front of me from the list of people who are going to participate. They're assuming that this plan is a mandate and that this is something the state's telling us that we have to do these things. And the only thing the state's telling us is that we have to have a plan. So we just have to put the document. Before we leave this page, though, I just would like to make sure everyone is listed properly here, that if there are any corrections or additions, we could just let us know that now. If that looks good, then we'll leave it.
Just and addressing the mission statement here and kind of thinking about closing doors to comments and concerns. While I agree with the mission statement and what you're putting there, considering different verbiage may be helpful in quieting some concerns. So creation of a reasonable number of additional housing options means that you are creating you're looking to create something and somebody's going to read that and they're going to say, you're looking to do something come hell or high water. So,
you're right.
You know, consider different, you know, not a number of, but consider additional housing options that may, you know, meet the needs of the community while keeping it the rural nature. Again, I don't know I'm not the best wordsmither in the world, but I do know how some people will read that and it's just going to derail a conversation.
So how about if we take out the creation of and just put supporting a reasonable number of additional housing options?
I think it would be good. You know, I think, may I just say one thing? I think you're going to, when we did our POCD, it was a little easy, even though we had all kinds of concern about the same thing that we're talking about here. But I think the fact that people are concerned that it comes from the state.
Yes.
And it is now it's a statute that we are required to have a plan at a certain time period. Now, so that there's no way, I mean, we can soften the language, but you will not be able to avoid majority of the concern because it comes from the state for us to have something like that that we would like to follow. So actually it's kind of a wish list of what we're going to come up with as far as the plan of affordable housing is concerned. So I think, like Lorenzo said, I think it's the less you make it sound like that somebody is you know, forcing us to do something, the better off we're going to be. But no matter what you do, the fact everyone knows it comes from the state, and it's a requirement to have that plan, and that comes from the state.
Yeah.
And when you have a plan that you actually endorse, as the Board of Selectmen will, then you know, that means that I don't want to use the phrase bought into it, but that we all agree, or the town agrees, or that we agree that based on our feedback from the town, they were going along with the affordable housing process. You know, I mean, but you can't soften that. I mean, if the fact is a fact, it is something that we're required to do, And it's mandated by the state to have that plan.
Right,
Yeah,
but
and
if we don't,
Sorry, I just to mention, we are in a couple later slides. I do try to emphasize the points
Yeah.
about it being.
I saw that.
Yeah.
That's great.
yeah, but we got to get to those slides. And if this slide derails the conversation, then that's my only point there.
So the important thing here is that there'll be no participation from the audience until we're done with the information. So this will all be coming out, and we're going to get through this with Patrick and me and Jocelyn talking through to give as much information as possible, so that at the end, hopefully some of those questions will be answered prior to, instead of having the questions come at the beginning. So that's what we're hoping. See what happens.
Possibly, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Larry.
Could you just say while identifying additional housing options that are needed according to residents?
I like that.
Yeah, that's great.
And that shows that we're driving the bus, not somebody else driving the bus. And I think that I'm reading through some of these comments on my other screen here, and because this wasn't communicated clearly with folks at the beginning, their imaginations and the gossip trail has taken root.
Yeah.
And that has bigger teeth than, at this point, than the real information. And what we need to do is we need to just keep those people at bay, so that we can educate them and show them that, hey, we're driving this bus, and B, it's a good thing, right? And no one's gonna, and here, what's in writing is no one's gonna change the rural character of Roxbury, and nobody wants to. But we got to do something, and that's what we're doing here.
The main opposition you will find that comes out of this whole situation is that people who own rather large homes feel that this process may dilute the value of their homes, and that's always the old saying, not in my backyard. But that's precisely what really drives that. In addition to the fact that we do have a requirement by the state to come up with that plan, and it is what it is. I don't think it's anything that we have to be really concerned about. When it's all said and done, we're going to take all comments from our citizens with great concern and with great sensitivity, and that's how we're going to approach it.
Right.
So I think, and then in the final analysis, we only can do so much to create that plan, even though we can say that we're going to do X, and then it has to be executed in the final analysis, and that's not a requirement.
Right.
The execution will be based on whatever the surrounding circumstances at that point in time confront us, and we have to deal with that.
Right.
All right,
To
so
echo-
Kim's going to do this slide and then this next slide, which is just kind of meeting protocol, right, Kim?
Yep.
We are gonna ask people to just, I don't think this is gonna take a long time to get through the slides, but we are gonna ask them to, just listen to this presentation for, I'd say it might take us 20 minutes or so. And then type their questions into the chat. And then I think you're gonna introduce me. Is that right, Kim?
Correct.
And I was gonna talk again about what we were just discussing, which is just underscoring that, one of the reasons that you're doing this is because every town has to have a plan. It is a guidance document. It has no regulatory authority. It's not the same as creating zoning regulations, for example. And so the other thing I wanted to say up front, again, just to try to address concerns either way about this plan. The good news and bad news is that any change that comes out of this plan will be slow, deliberate, and require the support of residents, which I really think is true. Like, you know, there are a lot of people that want more housing options, and the bad news for them is that it's going to be slow, deliberate, and require the support of residents. And the good news for people that are worried about what might happen is the same thing, you know. So I just kind of wanted to underscore that, again, this is a guidance document, and anything that comes from this is going to require, you know, further support from residents to take the next step.
Jocelyn,
Certainly
can I-
anything related to zoning.
Can I ask
the good
one
news, bad
question?
news, I just found it kind of confusing.
Yeah,
I wonder if the statement is a really good one. I wonder if, I don't know what others think, but maybe.
okay,
just-
well, I can take it out. I mean, I could say it that way without having it there.
Yeah, yeah.
Good news, bad news, yeah.
Jocelyn, can I ask a question?
Yep,
Jim? In the first paragraph, at least once every 5 years, must prepare or amend an affordable housing plan. And then down at the bottom, plan does not have to be limited only to affordable housing residents. So are we addressing both affordability and overall general housing, or one or the other, or both?
well, that's up to you. I mean, the plan, most of the towns that I have been working with have decided to have their housing plan address all of their housing needs, not just the housing needs of people at or
Okay.
below 80% AMI. And so it does have to address that as well, because that is in the legislation. So it can't completely leave that out, but it can, it can certainly include the whole spectrum of housing needs, that, again, that you determine there are based on the survey and the data,
Correct.
and all of your experience living in town. And
Mhm.
However, that would not be part of the affordable housing plan they were going to set forth. So I think that the whole trend, as Jim just pointed out, I think we're certainly very much have been talking about to making changes to make have more of a diversification on values and so on, and sizes and all that kind of stuff. We've been talking about that, but isn't the affordable housing plan, doesn't it address in particular the criteria of residents earning under 80% of the AMI? Isn't that what the housing plan is all about?
it doesn't have to be limited to only that.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in most of the other towns, we're not titling it the affordable housing plan. We're titling it the town's housing
Okay.
plan.
Yeah, well, I see you've done that. But that was my
Yeah.
reason for my question. Okay.
I mean, but it's up to you all. I mean, some towns might decide they want to just have a plan for housing that's affordable to their residents at 80% of their median income or less, and that would be fine too. That's totally up to the committee.
When do we define that to the participants of this
On the next slide.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's the one where we talk about what is the definition of affordable housing, which you all have seen 1,000 times by now, but it is the 80% of the area median income households paying no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And then the next slide, these are questions that come up frequently, and we don't have to put these in now. We could wait for them to come up potentially, but there is this perception maybe that some people that live, or that affordable housing is for people that don't work, which isn't true. And then sometimes there's questions about, well, there's not a lot of jobs in my town. Where would these people work? So anyway, this was meant to address those questions, but if you don't want to do that up front, we could take the slide out.
I would keep it.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, I think might as well be open with the whole concept.
yeah, I agree.
And I don't need to spend a lot of time on it. I'll just run through it real quick. And then we have the 10-minute, not quite 10-minute video, which shows them what affordable housing looks like in some of the other small towns. And then we were going to jump to, Kim, were you going to do this, the results of the survey?
Yeah, I think, you actually had put in my name or someone else, and, we want to make sure that if anyone has a burning desire to participate in this, you can tell us, and we can put you in and have you go over any of this if you'd like. So you can let me know what you think about that. I'm happy to continue along with Jocelyn in this. So yeah, I mean, it's really the highlights of it. And
Is this data a combination of the two surveys that we sent? Okay.
yep. Yeah. And so what I liked, Jocelyn, that you did was to, ranking them in the order, so that we can see what the most was down to the least of those top picks. And it was interesting. I think that certainly the question, and we knew we were going to, this was going to spark a lot of angst, but the question on the multifamily housing and the 4 units was the one that received the most, I think, response. People saying, feeling one way or the other in particular.
High-rise condos coming up.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, the whole dissertation about the EMFs was interesting. They were
About-
talking about putting in a networking, what was this? Electromagnetic frequencies due to a
Yes.
cell tower.
A
on
cell
their thing.
tower.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That
Well,
was,
but that's another example of people's imaginations taking over when they don't have enough facts to,
Mhm.
they don't have the right information being communicated to them.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so we'll do this kind of, again, just overview of what the survey said. And then I was going to run through just the basics very quickly about the housing data. Again, like how many people live in your town, the population changes over the last 10 years, the things that we talked about at that meeting when we went over this, but I'll go through it pretty quickly. The fact that 94% of your housing stock is all one kind of housing. So I won't go through all these with you again, but I did sort of, whittle it down to these overview kind of slides about how many of your current homeowners are cost burdened. Obviously, everyone's seen the sales prices rising, so that won't be surprising. And then how much affordable housing you have currently in the town. And then that kind of general overview of the, what the housing data shows us.
If we could go back to the other one.
This one?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting for you to just to highlight what it means, the 2020 government assisted, and then the mortgages.
Yep,
Just
I
to,
can talk about that.
yeah, just so they understand what those things are.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I am, the fact that there's 19 units here, but Bernhardt only has 18, I really don't know where that other one
Yeah.
is. But I can talk about that in general, certainly.
Jocelyn, it could be a Section 8 rental.
Well, those are usually here.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Unless it's in the wrong place and the data is incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Larry,
Yeah.
the Department of Housing's data spreadsheets aren't always 100% accurate.
Really?
I know that was going to be surprising to you.
Jeez.
Color me surprised.
But yeah, I can try to figure that out. But in the meantime, I can certainly explain what these two categories are, where most of them fall.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, so I was going to run through that quickly, and then we were going to talk about the next steps in the process now that you've done the data needs assessment and the survey, and then this is obviously the town informational forum. And then sort of just talk them through kind of what the next steps are and, you know, opportunities for public feedback and comment. Then just, you know, again, give them the opportunity to ask questions or share ideas that they have. And I think, again, what we were going to try to do is have people type things into their questions or comments into the chat box, and then we can just sort of take them as they come.
Jimmy's going to give me an updated list of the names and then the comments so that the day of, I'll have a more, because what I have here is actually the list of names, as I've mentioned before. And some people we're giving them the option to put their comments or questions in that as they register and not necessarily in the chat. So we'll probably start. Yeah, we'll probably start with these and then go to the chat.
And how many people do you have registered so far?
35.
That's good.
Yep. And then it's going to go out again in another email blast. Patrick is going to send that out. And I talked to Jimmy today, and we just made a little bit of an adjustment because I didn't think it was clear. And I didn't want people to be surprised that when they got to the meeting, that it was going to be set up in the way where we're asking them to write their comments or questions, as opposed to just in a town meeting, one person at a time getting up to speak. Because with that many people, it's going to be pages of people, you know, and it's too difficult. So, you know, I just asked him to clarify, and we kind of went over that together so that they understood they could write their comments.
So is the chat going to be the open chat we all use in Zoom where everybody sees everything? Or the Q&A function, which is different, where only the presenters get to see that?
Yeah, it'll be chat to host only.
Yeah, to host. Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Otherwise, yeah, it gets crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to
sure
say.
you've seen. And it's
No,
just
I mean,
it can be so distracting to try to,
Yeah,
That's the beauty
Jocelyn,
of Zoom.
What's
ahead,
that?
Charlie.
That's the beauty of Zoom to have it that way. Actually, this makes it much more organized and much easier to deal with.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit ago about our plan covering affordable housing and other things, but there's nothing in what we've gone through for anything else. So if we're going to talk about downsizing, for example, or anything else, we need to say what it is. And then if there's any data or other explanatory information, we need to put that in, because right now we may say the plan's broader, but there's nothing else there that we've gone through in the presentation.
I'm sorry. Good.
No, go ahead.
On the resident housing needs survey, just the highlights of it, the second one, 49% think town needs downsize options.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. But I mean, we didn't bring that up.
Yeah, it is on one of those data slides. You know, it talks about, for example, the number of, you know, that the majority of homes in Roxbury are 3+ bedrooms, for example, and only a smaller minority of people have more than 2 people living in their house. But I think I'm happy to add another slide if you want to kind of call that out as something that this plan could work on.
Well, I mean, I think we've had the general statement in the very beginning that it will cover housing options for the town. Then we defined affordable housing. We went through what other towns are doing, what other towns are doing for affordable housing. So we've got a picture of what affordable housing might look like. I think somewhere we ought to say that our plan will include affordable housing and downsizing and whatever else this group wants, but I think we need to say that rather than, I see there is some data there, but it's not, we never really said that's what we're
Right.
gonna work on for our plan.
I agree with Charlie 100%. And when I would make it as clear as a bullet point on our focuses of this plan are downsize, whatever the biggest concerns are for the town, let them know what the destination is. Again, we're back to the driving the bus analogy. We're driving the bus and this is where we want to get to. Ability for our seniors to stay in town and not be forced out because of cost, right? Places that they can maintain if they don't want to mow 4 acres of lawn anymore. Now they can, get into something more realistic, whatever the town desires. Bringing in some diverse, opening the doors for younger couples and younger families to come into Roxbury. And if they want to live in Roxbury the way that it is, right? That's what I've heard from everybody. Don't change Roxbury. We said that right off the get-go, right? It's part of the mission statement. But we haven't specified that we're open to diversity if they want to live here. If diversity wants to live here, that's great. I remember talking to one of the guys in town. He says, hey, I was told that I was the last Italian they were going to let into town. Okay. And it was a joke and I laughed, the same thing, but we need a little bit more diversity. I love diversity. I came from a city, but I also love Roxbury the way it is. And I think Charlie, is that basically what you were getting at? Come right out of the gates and say, this is where we're trying to get to.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with him 100%.
Say we want to increase diversity, but I agree with everything else you said. And I think we need to put that more at the beginning. Yeah.
Anybody who wants to live in a place like this, and experience this while working hard and, keeping their places nice and, everything we stand for. Yeah, we should be open to them.
Jocelyn,
Yep.
may I ask you a question? Earlier, you said, like other towns, they're using a different verbiage. They're not using the affordable housing because I think that triggers people emotions and they have these negative stereotypes about that. And Roxbury, quite honestly, that might not apply to this community for a lot of different reasons. But I think if we put more emphasis on that, not necessarily the affordable housing because it has such a negative, everybody thinks negative about it, but more to change the verbiage where it can fit this community, where you go to downsizing for senior citizen or open it up for teachers. If it makes it more friendly to the residents that are here and the needs of this community, then it may get a better reception with the community. And leave out trigger words like diversity or affordable housing because it does trigger people's emotions.
I'm with
And
you.
since other communities already do that and you want to have some success, and it's really vital and important to say to people, it's not mandatory. It's just a plan. That's the only thing we have to do. It's not going to be forced on you. We want, and you are the community, so we need your input. But if you present it like that and give them all the education that, all the data, then I think you'll have a better response from the community. Because I read some of those responses and I was just like, whoa, people's fears are up. Lord have mercy. And if you just present it to them where no, it's your community and we are looking out for our best interest, but just kind of take away the trigger words. And Roxbury may not be a place for, affordable housing or a suburb. I like it rural, so.
Can we call it I just want to float a word by you all. Can we call it the appropriate housing plan?
That's better.
How about just a housing
Well,
plan, which it seems
I-
like.
What,
Housing
may
plan.
I just comment on that, appropriate? We may just say appropriate for whom?
Yeah, I think it's just,
Or
Yeah.
Roxbury.
I think if you isolate it to certain segments of opinion and so on, I think housing plan, the
Yes.
Roxbury housing plan is probably the best way to call it, as we had in our previous slide. We didn't
That's
call it affordable
nice.
housing. I
Yes,
think
that's
I-
that's how it
nice.
should be called.
Can I say something?
Go ahead,
Peter,
Jim.
Peter and I, we have a term we used many, many years ago when we were both going through this. And we stayed away many years ago from affordability. We used alternative housing.
That's right.
I like
And
that.
that was done.
Yeah, I
And we
mean, I
didn't-
guess, so I struggle, as you might guess, I struggle with this a lot. Everybody wanting to call it something different. And I don't, so what I guess what I sort of hope that we can do is in fact, like you're saying, I mean, you're saying people aren't necessarily opposed to downsizing options, but downsizing options might in fact be affordable to people at
Yeah.
80% of the AMI, and they are affordable housing. So what I sort of struggle with this, like making up other words for basically the same thing. But, I think that's sort of why I sort of try to define it up front, hoping that people, but I mean, I don't disagree with you. And I understand that it is a sort of, some people have a very specific vision of what affordable housing is and what it looks like, which is what I think part of what this forum hopefully will help people understand, if they see the video and they see what it looks like and they hear what we're talking about, what do we mean by it? I guess what I'm hoping is that we don't necessarily have to hire a branding expert
Yeah.
to relabel the word, that we could just come to a better understanding that we don't have to be scared by that word.
Mm.
Well, I
But-
think, first of all, isn't to me, honesty is always the best approach to it. And I think if you just simply use, we can't afford to have specificity in the type of housing and the type of people and that we want to come into this property. We want to address the senior community, the downsizing issues, allowing younger people to enter Roxbury, and providing kind of a diversity in terms of values, in terms of housing sizes, not necessarily diversity of ethnicity. I mean, that you got to be very careful with that. And I think that's America is a country of all ethnic groups. And I think, Roxbury is just a minor example of what America is, so I think if we keep it on that level, and not get too tricky with our approach and comments and labeling of certain issues, I think we're better off. So to call it a housing plan for Roxbury, I think your first slide, didn't that say that, Jocelyn? You didn't call it affordable housing plan on your first slide. I think
it does.
I'm happy with that. I know if anybody is not happy with that, I think you can't get any more. Generally, we want a housing plan. And then in that plan, we're explaining what that housing plan that we're trying to endeavor, the type of housing plan that also includes the type of housing that's affordable in the context of 80% of income.
Okay. I'm looking back at the slides. I will just call it housing plan in all the places where, where it says that right now. There were a couple places that said affordable housing plan, and I'll work on another slide to do what you guys are talking about. Where are you?
Charlie,
just one more comment. I'm sorry. One more comment about that. No matter what you do, you will always get the same kind of objections to whenever you change a plan, whenever you have a new plan coming up, people will translate it into their own opinion. And now it becomes a matter of, is the majority of the population in Roxbury for the plan that we're going to come up with and hope to achieve, or are they not? And that's a bottom line to it. So I think as general and as flexible as we can make it look like to the people that ultimately decide as to they want to go with or not, is that would be the best thing to do. Try to be as general and flexible and friendly with the approach to having this plan done.
Can I ask, Charlie, can I ask you and Sue a question? I was wondering, are you guys, I mean, again, at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about having this separate, separate potentially, nonprofit Roxbury Housing Trust type organization. Are you guys pursuing that?
We're not. We haven't done anything since the fall, before the election. When we said
So
we should wait until after the election.
I was wondering whether you wanted, or again, this isn't the only public forum that we're going to have on the housing plan. But I didn't know whether you would want to talk about that. I mean, I think typically how any of this ever gets done is by having that type of organization in town, again, made up of Roxbury residents who want to move this forward. And I just wonder if you want to talk about that, even in just one slide that one is thinking of starting to form.
I don't
No,
think so.
okay. That's fine. I just didn't know if you were looking for other people who might be interested in.
That's the problem. We need more people and we need younger people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we don't have to do it at this forum. We could do it at a next one, but if you wanted, we could put it out there that if people are interested in that, they could let somebody know.
The video, I mean, I think the video is a really good way to introduce that, to see what the other towns have done. I mean, I think in listening to this conversation, I mean, I think, using housing plan, I think the education that's going to be done during the presentation all should be for the goal of just, getting people away from being really nervous about it. And I think it should. And if it doesn't, if there's still people, then, there's nothing else you can do. I think we're going to do the best we can. Peter, I think that's sort of what you were saying, is you put it out there. And, but I do think the video is really helpful in that regard. And it does, Jocelyn, give you, I think, the opportunity to say that something like this could exist in Roxbury, and, down the road, there may be some opportunities to talk about it.
That might be a good thing to say. I don't think we should go into it in any real detail, but
Okay.
it'd be nice to use it as an opportunity. So people would be willing to volunteer in that effort. They could call Jocelyn or call Kim, probably the best thing. And that would be great.
I think I'm going back to one of the slides, Jocelyn, that you had presented in one of our prior meetings, where you talked about the difference between our committee and a Roxbury Housing Organization. And that kind of information, I think, is important and can be put in. And I'm looking at some of the slides now after our discussion. I think some of this can be scaled down and a couple of things actually removed that we might not need to present to people in the way that it is. Because I think everybody knows that there's, mostly single family homes and 3+ bedrooms. And I don't think that's going to be a surprise to anyone, but I think this kind of information, what Charlie's talking about, adding in about the downsizing, and then because that video actually does talk about, where that money has come from, a lot of these private organizations where it's not federally funded. some are, some aren't. I think I still think I agree that that's still information that'd be helpful to put in.
May I have one? I have one question, Jocelyn. When we first started out with this steering committee, we were talking about, or it was your hope that we would not only achieve this affordable housing plan or a housing plan, but also have achieve the housing authority group that would come out of our same process that we're all going through now. So, I mean, once we have the housing plan, should we continue to reinforce that? Because as I understand it, the housing authority would not be made up of anyone in that is in the town management, or is it? There would be simply people from the population that's living in town, just citizens who would form their own independent nonprofit organization. Is that not correct?
Some of what you said is correct.
Okay.
I never call it a housing authority. Typically I call it a housing trust type organization. But I do think, as we were just talking about it as well, you know, that it's not necessarily that we need to do the housing plan and create a Roxbury housing trust at the same time. But I would say, again, based on my experience in the small towns, having an organization like a housing trust is usually pretty critical to moving forward with implementing your plan. So if we can, through this process, get more Roxbury residents interested in helping to meet housing needs and interested in the possibility of volunteering on a Roxbury housing trust or some other organization like that, that would be kind of a byproduct of this process we're going through, engaging residents in, you know, understanding the housing needs and what can be done about them. Hopefully that will get them to also want to potentially volunteer.
But that was my concern originally, but I said that we should limit it to one, to be specific to the housing plan, and not intermingle that with a potential housing, and I won't call it authority again, but the group that will be formed, that should be formed once we have our housing plan. I think it would be a lot easier to actually have the population engaged.
Peter, it's already in your town plan to.
Yeah, I know that. I understand that, but
I think if there's a group of residents that want to create something like that, they can do it any day they want.
Yeah, and I thought we had kind of initiated that. Charlie, am I correct in assuming that you already had started that process, or am I wrong on that?
We had some meetings. We had Bill Fairbairn come to one of the meetings, and want that to become part of election time. And then we haven't started up again since November. So, but one thing that was clear to me was we had sporadic attendance. You know, sometimes there were more people, sometimes there were less, but we don't have younger people who I think we need you need officers. You need somebody who's going to be a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. You know, I didn't see a pool from which we were going to be able to really staff an organization.
That's why
Sue and I are very interested, but we're not interested in being, you know, one of the lead people in the group. It's just not going to happen.
All right, so I apologize for bringing this up. So let's put this on the side burner for now. I think we've talked it over, and we do have other things on the agenda.
We have a question from Sue.
I have yes. I believe that this forum is next Thursday, right? The 27th, is it?
Correct.
Isn't that presentation, another Zoom presentation by HRRA on recycling and all that, the same time, same day, same time?
The day before.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we changed it because of this. Yeah.
Patrick, you're muted.
Was that put out?
Yes, the trash talk is on the 26th at 6:30.
Did you put
and
that out there? Because I don't remember seeing a change because
It's
I'm.
in
very-
the email. It's
too.
in the email.
Yeah.
The original date for the trash talk was going to conflict with today. The
Right.
first date for the trash talk would have been today. They postponed it for basically a week. So it's next Wednesday at 6:30.
Okay, thanks.
Wednesday. Thank you. Now I can do both. Happy.
I'm gonna sound very stupid here, but what's the trash talk all about? I must have missed
Well,
it.
you know what? You know what? That's more reason for you to show up.
There you go.
That's
We'll
right.
tell you all
Are we,
about it.
are we actually talking about trash? That's what we're gonna do with it?
Oh,
Is that
yeah,
gonna be
we're
the
gonna-
supposed-
Yeah, we're
oh, I
gonna
see,
talk
okay.
trash. Absolutely.
We're gonna trash talk.
It's about
Roxbury.
I better start recycling right away. When I get home, I'll put all
What
stuff
can
in
be
different
recycled, what can't
buckets.
be recycled, how
We're
it
gonna-
works, and all of that, which we all need to know and understand and participate in. We have to.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
anybody can bring a beverage to the Zoom meeting, just don't use a nip.
Don't use what?
A nip bottle.
Oh, and Nick,
Conservation is against nip bottles, so.
What?
Little nip bottles, the little
Tiny,
bottles that people
Yeah.
drink and they throw out of their car and
But
Yeah.
Lorenzo, if you buy a nip in Roxbury, every purchase has 5 cents that goes directly to Roxbury. Did you know that?
Good.
I did. I
Oh.
did.
That's a new law. So if you're gonna buy your nips anywhere, buy them in town.
But throw them out of your window and sell
Every nickel. Yeah.
So are we
Oh,
starting
this is
that,
recorded. Oh my God.
starting that program
sorry.
again, Patrick? Patrick, are
What's
we
that?
starting that program again where we
Okay.
5-cent return cans and bottles?
We're working on
That
it.
is good start. That's a whole different topic. We'll talk about that. That's because they're building a new facility.
A
So they
new-
had to suspend the pickup of those bottles, but that's a whole nother topic.
We're
Yeah.
working on it.
Yes,
Let's
we
stay on
will.
housing. I gotta eat dinner.
okay. So back to this. So we, I think we'll, we're gonna meet, Jocelyn and I are gonna be meeting anyway and talking about some stuff. So, and Patrick, so we can take a look at some of the additions.
Yep.
For stuff. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll send them back out to you just in case you have any deep concerns about them. Yep.
That's great. Okay.
All right, so I think we have talked somewhat. The next thing on the agenda is just to see, if you want to talk more about the survey results. Now that we got some more responses, as Kim mentioned at the beginning, didn't really change the percentages very much. And I will say that you guys have a terrific, awesome response rate, better than any other town I'm working with, including towns with like much, much bigger population sizes like Torrington. So
It would be
and-
good for
and-
you to say that.
I
when
agree.
you- Yeah, it
Mhm.
would really be good to say that.
know,
And
that
I did do a sample size calculation for, a 95% confidence level, 5% margin of error. And you would have only had to get 269 responses to have that be true. And you guys got how many?
380,
800, yeah,
382.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, you can feel pretty, pretty reassured that in terms of the sample size itself, that you got a representative sample. So, and I know I will say, I'm always hesitant, the open-ended responses, just so you're reassured, maybe somewhat, the kind of things that people said, they say in almost every town. They're pretty common concerns about all the things that we already talked about. But again, I think it's always interesting to look at them and sort of see where people are coming from and, yeah. So I don't know if people want to talk more about those survey results or anything that jumped out. Yep.
I have just one thing that I think would be good if you made that statement as well. Just like Judy said about the response rate, just to say that, you know, the comments are seen throughout other towns too. I think if people realize that this is not just our own bubble that we're in and we're
Yeah.
the only ones dealing with it, that this is a much broader issue through the whole county, that in your experience, I think will hold a lot of weight there so that people understand it's not just us. It does help to, I think, minimize some of the angst. That'd be great.
Okay.
If there are any comments, negative comments you haven't heard in that response, Jim and I can fill you in on everything that we've heard throughout the last 4 or 5 years that we worked on it.
Yeah.
Believe me, we heard them all. So,
Well, and I will say,
Totally
I
valid.
was listening to a podcast the other day about this kind of bias we have when we read comments. Like, I'd be interested to actually, I don't know if I'll have time, but sort of to analyze how many positive or neutral comments there were versus negative, because there is this bias we have in our head where you like get one negative thing and it feels
And
like
it's
it has
highlighted.
sort of an outweighed,
Yeah.
you know, you have a bigger response to that comment than you do to the neutral ones or the positive ones. So
I did enjoy, you know, I felt good, you know, people, if they had negative comments or just concerns, and then they went, but thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
You're welcome.
yes.
but I think in general, I think the comments, even throughout our smart growth and the POCD and what have you, in general, they are all geared to make it better for Roxbury. I mean, I think Roxbury is very unique in that respect. You know, and I think it's why people move here. It's almost like you know, you're dealing in a, if you ever set in on if you have an extended family, for example, you know. You know, you could be lucky to have it as good in an extended family or two families getting together that we have it in Roxbury. We have a much better dialogue. We have much better exchange of ideas that I think that I see happening in Roxbury. Whenever we get to something as big as this, there's always great participation, and it isn't all negative. I mean, even the questions that come up, they're good questions. And if somebody has a question as to they have a concern about something, we should be able to answer that in a positive way. So I think
Yeah.
I was very pleased to hear everything that we had on our survey. So.
I agree.
Okay, so and then the sort of the last thing that's on the agenda for tonight, relatedly, is kind of talking about what you all have seen, like when you looked at the survey results and or again thinking back to the analysis of your existing housing stock. You know, what do you think? And I think we already talked about this because I think it's the slide that we're going to add about what the housing needs are that we want the housing plan, that you want the housing plan to cover. Because again, sort of the next step in the process is to focus in on those specific needs. And the ones I heard you guys talk about tonight were, again, the downsizing options, senior housing option, keeping seniors in town, younger families, and then just potentially some different sizes of housing, you know, that aren't 3+ bedrooms. So those are the things I heard in our conversation earlier. And I guess I just wonder if there's any other needs that you guys are seeing either in the survey results or in the data that we should add to that, because our next step, like at the next meeting of this group, we'll get into focusing in on what some goals might be for the plan. And then we'll move into kind of what the strategies are for meeting those goals.
One of the things that I saw in the comments, and I think this would be important for us going forward when we're talking about verbiage, we spent time listing the possibility of trying to get young families affordable home situations for teachers. And if you remember some of the comments that people wrote, said, well, what about, it doesn't have to, why just teacher?
Yeah.
You know,
I saw that. Yep.
pigeonhole a particular job.
Yeah.
Or about, you know, having that be a broader base as well. I think that will be more inclusive.
Good idea.
One of the things that may be referencing to is the fact that people like teachers to live in their communities.
Yeah.
You know, when my sister was a teacher in an elementary school, and that was one of the things that they looked at, and they said, hey, there was actually, it's the same thing with police and firemen, and you know, sometimes even offer incentive or assistance if certain types of jobs live in town or within, you know, so
Right.
many miles from town. So I again, it may be jobs like teachers, you know, but I think that's probably what that is geared towards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kim, didn't we have that? Didn't we have that as part of the group? Teachers, firemen, EMS, and so on. I think it wasn't in the same slide or in the same questions that we raised.
Yeah, there was a
Wasn't it?
question. It was more specific to teachers.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I think some people took offense that it was just.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought that might be good to, maybe there's a way to phrase it so it's, you know, people.
Public service.
Service, yeah, public service.
Public service. Yeah, that's a good way of
That would be great. Yep.
You know, in those survey results, in like, I don't remember exactly, but when it talked about, would you support, you know, basically something that would allow smaller dwellings or attached dwellings, whatever it was, roughly the 30-something was in favor, 30-something% was opposed, and 30-something% said they needed more information, something to that effect.
Yeah.
So
That's,
we might want to say sometime during the program, we noted, you know, that there were people who needed more information. If you didn't get it tonight, please call so-and-so, or, you know, let us know, because that's a big percentage of people who really feel they did no way to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I think
That's their opinion.
yes, and that was something I was going to bring up in my opening, just to talk a little bit about that. But we have to remember, this is our first public forum. And so we won't be able to answer everyone's question next week.
Yeah.
It's a start. So
And if I could just jump in, I do think, you know, I don't know if you guys remember, but I was a little hesitant about putting that in that survey because it's so specific and it jumps to like a strategy conclusion. And I think what you mentioned, Charlie, in terms of those results, it's important. And I think we need to think about it as we move forward with the strategies, and know that if we're going to ask residents to potentially support a strategy like that, we're going to have to give them a lot more information about what we mean. Like, you know, is it only in a certain part of town, or is it only on parcels that are this big, or is it going to be allowed everywhere? And
Okay.
so I would think that people, I mean, I would answer that question that way. I want a lot more information about where that's going to go and how many you're going to allow. And so I think that would be great to talk about in the next forum if this committee decides they want to pursue the idea of that strategy going forward.
Okay, good point.
And at the next forum, we can also do, you know, some polling, so we could ask people questions and we could have them respond to polling questions. And you know, again, I think this one is more sort of informational. We want you to understand what this committee is working on and what we're doing. And here's the needs we're seeing. And then at the next meeting, we're going to talk about goals and strategies.
yeah. One thing I found is, and what you just said, Jocelyn, it's very important. I think the first meeting, the first contact with the group, I think would be, we don't want to overload that with all kinds of data and different types of housing and how do we achieve it, all kind of stuff. I think it should be just informational. And then from that, you will create a lot of questions that can be handled in the second one. So
I had a question. I noticed in one of the responses from the community, they mentioned something about for attracting younger families, like having something for a first-time buyer or something, like an incentive. I mean, to attract them to the community so you have more children. Because one of the things that struck me was that we lost like 106 kids. And there are a lot, and like the highest population is unfortunately people my age or a little older. So that's concerning if you want to like Charlie and said, you know, you want younger families, you want younger people to come along to kind of pick up and carry on the traditions. So how do you do that?
Can I just bring up a point real quick, Lenora? All of these numbers were pre-COVID when they took the all the census data. So we actually had, you know, quite a few, you know, our dynamic changed through COVID. In the same time, so some of the numbers that we're looking at from a census side are a little dated. The numbers that we're looking at from a real estate and the increase of price and lack of renters and like our economic situation changed during COVID. So the census figures are before that, but the financial ones are from now.
Okay.
Is that a good way to summarize it, Jocelyn?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think when they were, you know, when the census was happening, it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh.
But yeah, I do think that some towns did end up getting more kids in schools.
We did, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think people are going to wonder, okay, where is this land going to come from?
Oh.
Where are we going to get it? Where is it? So how and when do you think that should be talked about?
Probably at the next meeting.
At the next meeting of us guys?
Well, sure. I mean, again, at the next meeting of us guys, we'll start talking about goals and strategies. But the next public forum will be presenting the goals and strategies that you all come up with and feel like should be presented to the community. And some discussion about that, you know, where could it be built and how could the land be found?
Yeah, because people are really going to focus on that, I think, a lot.
We're getting back into the solution issue.
That's right.
Getting back in a solution issue, which I was confronted as not doing that. But you know, what really happens is that was all said and done. You have to have an entity that's going to build something and produce something that is profitable to them to produce. And they have to produce it in a way where it fits into a price category that can be considered affordable. And so it's going to be a combination between private enterprise, perhaps some state assistance with mortgages and so on. But that's going to be a combination of the town cannot buy land and produce the product. I mean, we've had that conversation some time back when we talked about the smart growth situation that we did for several years. But that's what's going to have to happen. There's got to be a combination between private enterprise and our plan. And to be successful on that plan, no matter what we plan, we can certainly say we want to produce that, we want to produce X number of units along those lines, and most of them. But besides that, we have our other plan that we need to have more diversity in terms of values and prices and so on. And that's only done by changing zoning, by changing all the kind of costs that are created by producing. And there are ways of doing that, but that involves a participation of the public and private enterprise and perhaps the state in certain respects.
Yep.
And that's going to grow. That's going to grow from the plan. You know,
right.
we can now answer it. We can't answer it now. It's going to come as we go forward.
Private enterprise may do some of it. There's a good article in the Voices about Middlebury. There's a development going in there with 20 some units. But anyway, but the housing trust is the other way, Peter. I mean, if the trust is able to get title to the land,
I agree.
And grants to help, fund construction costs. And that, I think that in most of these other communities where they've done this, the trusts have played a very large role in this, very large role. So
I couldn't agree with you more, Charlie. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
okay.
But that alone cannot produce perhaps what our plan says we would like to produce in terms to provide that kind of affordable housing.
Sure,
So
sure.
it'll be a combination of what we just talked about. Going to be private banking. It's going to be building institutions. It's going to be a number of companies and corporations and private enterprises that's going to tie in and work together. That's the only way you do it.
25 years behind Washington, maybe 30 years. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. They have.
Can I just ask a question?
Hang on.
Yeah, could I ask a question about next week, just because it's in my brain right now? So is the hearing, I mean, does it have an end time, or does it just go until there's no more questions?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I would just say, I've done a few of these, the one we did in Washington for Washington's housing plan process, we had over 100 people attend. And we still got through it in about an hour and 15 minutes.
Really?
So, and that's not to say that it's going to be exactly the same in Roxbury. Every town, there could be people with lots of questions, but I guess I would say that it's certainly possible. I mean, I've gotten through some of these, the same forum with just an hour. So I would say, this is my opinion, but I would say, we'd let it go an hour and a half. And then if there's still a lot of questions, we maybe offer to have another forum or ask people to come. I don't know. What do you guys think about what to offer if it goes over an hour and a half?
Well, I think that what we've seen already in the questions and comments is that there's different categories. And just, today, Patrick and I were both on this 2-hour legal webinar, in a sense. And so all the questions coming up on the chat was like, okay, well, that was asked about 10 times and this was asked about 10 times. And so I think we'll find during this process too, that there'll be very, very similar concerns and questions and comments. So not that we will read every single one, but we'll go, okay, so this is similar to these next 3. So I think it'll go faster because of that.
So is it only going to be questions, or are people going to be able to rant and rave about things? You've seen.
We are pushing for this to be that everyone will be muted and that this will be written responses in the chat that will come to Patrick, me, and Jocelyn, and that we will read the questions or comments. And so it will not be, we were hoping it will not be that.
Okay.
You
That's
have
good.
control over the mute button. So
Yeah. That's good. That's good, because it could get ugly or it could be lovely. Who knows?
Well, we had Jim and I had some experience on that, and we were very, very able or very capable of just managing a meeting. It's really comes down to the moderator. You can't get antagonistic toward the questioner. You have to be very, very understanding of their question. And if it was answered before, then you very nicely simply make that point and explain it again. And if it explains 3 times, you can do that, and that can be done very quickly. So I think it just comes down to who moderates a meeting and how late they are for dinner and they want to get out of there. So anyways.
Peter, this is Larry.
We could have pizza, virtual pizza. How's
It's
that?
at 9 o'clock.
okay, Larry.
I've been through this before. I mean, that was my business. It will turn out differently than you've ever thought. It will take far longer than you've ever thought.
Yeah, you can project that.
And it's a long road, but it's worth it at the end.
Yeah.
And you just go with it day by day, because there's always going to be a surprise. You'll find out you really don't control much.
Yeah.
especially if you're dealing with the state of Connecticut. So,
Okay. Right, but is that, did we cover everything?
Yeah, again, I think if people have, are seeing other needs, like segments of housing need that we haven't talked about tonight, email it to me or shout it out now. But otherwise, what I'll do to prepare for the next steering committee meeting, which is February 17th, is start kind of working on some outline that includes, again, what those needs are and what some goals and strategies could be. So we can start talking about that at the next meeting.
Jocelyn, do you know if I'm not sure who to ask, but does the town still have an active housing rehabilitation program?
Ever?
Uh,
I think we do. I think we do. I've just, my last few conversations with Barbara, I think there were some offers made to certain people in town to rehab some of their homes who had gone into ill repair. Patrick, I believe
I remember
you
that.
may know about that.
Sorry, I realized I was talking when I was on mute. My apologies.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
okay.
there is. And there's also grants and things.
Yeah, that's what
More
I thought.
commonly, there is, historic funds and things that Wendy Walker has been kind of championing around town. But there is some aid, but then there's also programs that, really not much is done, but there is a buyback program.
We
That
don't have.
program is
we don't have
ongoing.
many-
I don't think there's anything currently being sponsored in any project. The last one was
You
closed
should
out.
be getting repayments occasionally.
Correct, we do.
Yeah, okay.
But there's nothing active. Most were from a long time ago. That pops up more on the Board of Finance side.
All right, because those funds can be reused in town again.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah, it's a good question, Larry. And I was gonna get there too, I think
I'm
eventually.
going to ask that. Yeah.
At
I'll
the
get
next
that.
meeting, but it would be good to know if there's any of the repayment funds that could be reused for that or for another related
And you can
affordable housing.
recapitalize that too. The state still has money. You
Yeah.
can just apply for another segment of funds.
Okay.
And that is
Jocelyn.
that's a very popular strategy in the housing plans.
Jocelyn, there
Yep.
was, in one of those responses, there was a question about creating homes for disabled children, adult children. I don't know if we talked about that as a housing option or if anybody cares, but that was one of the responses that somebody put out there.
Okay. Yeah, I think accessibility is a good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there were several that talked about single story,
yeah.
so that would all fit in.
All right, great. I don't want to keep you guys any longer. But yeah, we will see how next Thursday goes. And hopefully answer some questions for folks. And then we will meet again on February 17th. And I'll put some, again, just for the starting the discussion, I'll put some goals and strategies together and send it to you guys before the next meeting, so that we can start talking about them.
And you'll send the PowerPoint out again with or that extra slide?
Yeah, you and I can talk about it maybe tomorrow morning, and then we'll try to get it finalized and send it out to everybody.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. It was a very good discussion. Thank you for your input.
He's
Thank
dead.
you.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Go have dinner, Lorenzo.
I'm off. Bye.